Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here this afternoon with Mr. Paul Newsome, who needs no introduction to the podcast whatsoever, being his third outing.
I think it's my third outing.
Your third outing, yes. Yeah. Except this time I've forced you into it. Today I wanted to have a conversation about something which is a very live issue for me right now.
1 week post event.
1 week post event, and that is about the period after a big event. Now, for me, that was swimming solo to Rottnest previous weekend, which is the big 20k open swim. But it could be anything, ranging from Ironman, marathon, climbing Everest,
Tour de France.
Not that many people do that. And I think well, it's important. It's interesting you bring that up, because I think it's important to scope out this discussion as well. In that, I think this is aimed very much at what I would call the everyday hero rather than the professional athlete. Although, professional athletes may listen to this and go, that applies to me too. And what I wanted to talk about was, everyone talks about, training and psychology and everything leading up to, during training and into the event. But nobody ever talks about what happens in the intervening period afterwards. And I think it's really important, because for all the great work and the journey that you go on, it can all get unpicked and unwound if you're not really cognizant of what's going on the other side. I swam a solo in 2016, and look, I've got a small endurance background of doing triathlons. I got to doing a 70.6 in England, 3 even. Yeah, probably felt like 6 today, didn't it? I did very large bike rides from Leicestershire to the south of England, ran a marathon and all that, and then came here in 2016. I swam a solo. So, last weekend was my second outing, but in doing it, I've been able to see the 2016 journey in a lot more clarity of what was going on and then what happened afterwards.
Yes, yeah.
And be a lot more cognizant of that. And I've also spotted some of that in some of the people around me who've done similar things. And I just thought that it's important to have a conversation with it anyway, but particularly being a live issue for me.
Yeah.
And given your background in...
I think, one of my reflections on it as well is that people are actually, I've only just noticed this in the last few years, that people are actually asking me to train them up for a big event like that, but then also put in a bit of a caveat for what happens after that period.
Yes.
So it's just like this, people are actually starting to become a little bit more aware that they need to consider what happens after a big event. They talk about, the big event blues, or the Rottnest Channel Swim blues sort of thing, the period of 3 or 4 weeks after the event, and just being sort of prepared for that and what that's going to entail, basically. So, if I dial back, I've been coaching now for 20 years, believe it or not, and I think 20 years ago, nobody would have ever been speaking about what happens after a big event. Mainly because, back 20 years ago, not that many people were doing these massive, crazy events. Like you say, the everyday hero or the weekend warrior sort of thing. The outreach and the availability of these big events has just got more and more and more in the last decade, especially. Yeah. So it is an issue that needs sort of looking at and addressing, and I'm keen to chat it out with you today and dive on in.
Yeah, because I think what I've noticed is everyone will recognise that you've done this level of training, you've had this great event, and then I think most people recognise that, particularly like Rottnest was on Saturday, come Tuesday, Wednesday, it's fucking dark, right? And it's depressive, and it's like, what the fuck is what's going on? And on a top level, I think most people can recognise that you've been doing this exercise which produces this mass amount of adrenaline, cortisol, all sorts of other great stuff, and that now you're coming off it. And I get that, but to me there's a whole lot more, and maybe from my background in organisational psychology I probably look deeper into it, but there just seems to be more going on. And my concern is that I think it's awesome that these large-scale events are more approachable, and as we'll probably talk a bit later on, there's no reason why you shouldn't do them. This is not a conversation about why you shouldn't do it.
No.
It's about, for me, coming out of it with more ease and grace, and taking all of the great stuff that you've picked up along the way and then threading that into your everyday life. Because let's just recognize, like the period of time that from when you decide to do it to when you do it is it's not a sustainable lifestyle.
No, it's not. No,
it's not sustainable on your body.
No.
It's not sustainable on your emotions.
No.
It's not sustainable on your family and friends around you. It will give you a good,
plenty of Ironman divorcees out there for sure.
Yeah, I bet, and we'll probably unpick some of that. And they are amazing things. I refer to them as impossible tasks because the day you decide to do it, the task is actually impossible to you on that day.
Yeah, sure.
And you have to layer up to meet the challenge.
Yep.
And do it. And particularly with things like swimming to Rottnest, for me, there's been bigger things as well, which we could go into, where I understood why I entered into it, but I didn't realise why I did it until well afterwards.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Because there were more things for me to unpack along the journey.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That these things face. But I just wanted to go a bit deeper because, like I said, there's a couple of things I've noticed. I want to chuck them out and see whether they resonate with you and you've seen anywhere else. I think the first thing for me is this sense of identity that people get.
Yeah.
Particularly in 2016.
I'm a Rottnest swimmer. I'm an Ironman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the I am statement.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, you commit to something and you're taking actions, and then it doesn't take long because you're quite focused before you get a bit of feedback. Whether that feedback is, your times become a bit quicker.
Yeah.
You start to feel a bit stronger. You look a bit better in the mirror. You start to feel better about yourself. You start to face some challenges and bear them down, and you come to your first red mist sessions, and then you get comfortable with them, and then you don't get comfortable with them. And all the time you're getting this feedback, and then I find that the feedback starts to percolate into your stories. It becomes the thing you talk about a lot.
Totally. Yeah.
You like to be in the group of other people that are doing it.
Yep.
I've over the last 3 to 4 to 5 months, I've been in 2 solo WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. Everyone's what time we're swimming, where we're going, and I've made wonderful new friendships.
Sure.
And spent awesome time with people. And I'll probably come back to that in a minute, but you're in this circle, and even those out of the circle are around you, they spot the differences and stuff. And so it starts to give you this new sense of identity, which then bleeds out into other parts of your life.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you achieve the thing, and now, what is it? 13 days later, I am no longer a Rottnest solo swimmer. I am no longer. That I am statement has departed.
I think if anyone's listening to this right now and they are sat in the company of a triathlete or an open water swimmer or a marathon swimmer or somebody who just takes their sport very, very serious, they're probably just sat there nodding their head thinking, you don't want to get caught in a corner at a Christmas party talking to a triathlete or an open water swimmer, because it will just bore you to tears talking about it. But it does, I wouldn't say it goes so far as to say it does take over your life, but it's the thing that you're focused on. And you mentioned there that you've only got to try and actually concentrate and focus on something for, let's say, 9 months or 12 months, or swimming the English Channel was like a 3-year project for me, basically. And I mean, that's a massive thing to consider. Staying focused for that length of time. I reckon my focus period, and I get more and more certain of this every single time I train up for something big, I reckon it's 10 weeks. So I can do a 10-week block, and then I almost need to factor in 2 weeks. And that won't be 2 weeks off, but it'll be 2 weeks of hey, let your hair down a little bit and go and do what you need to do and stuff. So, I think for programs going forwards, I mean, that doesn't necessarily fit the standard 9 or 12 month build up for an event where you do 3 weeks on and 1 week easier and 3 weeks on and 1 week easier. But it sort of recognises a little bit more of that. What can you actually focus on? How long can you stay engaged for, sort of thing, properly engaged for? And I think, I mean, maybe, obviously I've got quite a bit of experience with doing a lot of these longer events, and even though I might not be at a great state of fitness right now, I know that within 10 weeks of dedicated focus training, I can get myself up to really quite a good level. Other people might take a little bit longer if their experience has not been as much, but the point of focus and you know, and where you gain that identity from, I feel it all the time myself. Like you start training, you decide that you're gonna do this event, and on the first couple of days, it's like, okay, well, get my routine sorted, get that happening, get that schedule happening, and then you start to notice these little gains and little wins of, I feel a bit better about that, I feel a bit better about myself. You know, I often talk about the idea that it takes you 6 swimming sessions to sort of like thoroughly get into the groove, basically. But then from then onwards, you know, you're on a bit of a roll, and yeah, and definitely identity comes with that. It's like you then start telling everybody, you feel confident enough to tell everybody that you're actually training up for something, which is a big step, you know. Like a lot of people, you have to own it, you know. And I know a lot of people, funny enough, this time around for Rottnest Solo Swim, who literally told me the week before that they were doing the solo swim. So they've been swimming within the squad and training in the sessions. You could say, well, how, as a coach, how do you not know that those swimmers are doing it? And they've purposely said to me, I didn't want to tell you because... And I just wanted to. I'm doing it more low key this time around, sort of thing. And you know, and that's to be respected, obviously. But I was quite sort of shocked, really, that they wouldn't have shared it with, you know, of all the people you think you could share the story
help along the way.
It might be the coach, but
I just think that there's something in that identity, because identity, as I've sort of worked out across the podcast, is, you know, we all like to know who we are. And we all think we've got a good handle on who we are, but our identity is quite a dynamic thing. You know, who I thought I was 10 years ago is a lot different to who I think I am today. So therefore it is changing and it's evolving. And when you go and put such a big focus into it, that identity can be something that you're quite proud of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then when that bit of your identity is
taken away,
or
simply finishes.
You're right. Yeah. It just simply finishes and it comes away. That can be quite existentially challenging.
Yeah. Definitely.
Just wondered if you had that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, when I think about some of the big events that I have done, when I finished the English Channel, all I just remember was being sore for a long time.
Yes.
You know, like shoulders, not being able to lift, but I had a feeling of like accomplishment and release to some extent, and just feeling a bit like, okay, I've done that thing that I've been building up for the last 3 years, and I was glad of a bit of recovery period. I definitely didn't feel any sort of post English Channel blues after doing that one. Similarly, when I swam around Manhattan Island and was lucky to win that event, I got home and felt like I was on top of the world for a long time. You know, I felt really, really good about myself. And obviously, the result helped a lot about that, or a lot with that, I should say. But it was only a few months after that I then injured my back, and I went from being high as a kite to lower than low, basically. And
so now you can't do the thing.
Yeah, now that you can't do the thing that you are, you know, you wanted to. I almost wanted to. I mean, even in my signature at that point on my email, I had like Paul Newsome, Manhattan Island champion, 2013. So it was my identity, right? And then I'm telling people, well, I'm actually going in for surgery for my back now, and I'm going to be out of action for about 6 months, and I've still got that signature at the bottom of my thing, and I almost felt a bit like a phony, because there I am hobbling around with this back problem.
And I think that's probably another bit, because there's like 3 main focus areas that I've landed on with this, and you probably just brought me into probably one of the second ones, is that there's something really cool about. So when you agree to do it, you know, you commit to doing a solo, you know, or any event, right? So just where I say solo, you can climb Everest.
Yeah, absolutely. Marathon.
But you know that, so I knew that on the last Saturday of February, I was going to have to stand at the beach at Cottesloe with this white cap on and these goggles on my head. And at some point there was going to hooter, and I was going to have to stand there and look out this flotilla of boats, but mainly this big expanse of water, the conditions of which I wasn't sure was going to be, and then swim to an island 20 kilometers away. And when you have to consider that, you there ain't no telling yourself stories, bullshitty stories, or shortcutting or avoiding that's going to help you.
No.
And so as soon as you get through that quite quickly, you realise you have to do everything that's required.
Yeah.
You have to understand what is required and then go and do everything that's required. And at no point along the journey can you afford to let shitty stories start to grow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's going to take you away and you think, oh, well, you know, it'll probably be a good day, so I don't need to go out and crack the 10Ks out on a shitty southwesterly day in training, because it's not going to be like that.
But it was.
But it was. Exactly, in the end it was. But I think, you know, and so for me, there is this fantastic, brutal honesty about undertaking these things, which means that you can't hide anywhere, you can't go and muck around in the shadows, you can't tell yourself the shitty stories.
No.
You have to be totally present, totally on it, and totally based in the reality of what you're doing. And let's be honest, that's rare in life. You know, because we all like to tell ourselves stories to make our egos feel better. Definitely, and this, that, and the other. And there's scope to do it because you never really get tested out.
No.
So you're not getting that blunter level of feedback. So for me, there's a beautiful, blunt honesty in undertaking these things. You know, on that day, I'm going to be found out if I haven't done the work.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all these people, you know, or yourself, are going to go, oh, you know,
yeah,
if you haven't done it. And so that itself can be awesome because you can get into that zone. But then, you know, like I said, outside of these contained environments, you know, you go into the workplace, people telling you shit about how great they are just to get a promotion when they're not really that great or haven't done the work, and everybody's caught a fish that's that big, that's only really that big, you know, and there's all fucking stories left, right and centre. And so I think it's also, after the event, it's easy to slip back, and you just sort of alluded to it, I think it's easy to slip back into storytelling. And so you could be the guy that, you know, had done the training, or the girl, done all the training, faced the honesty of it all, and then afterwards, bang, doesn't necessarily, like, I'm fucking overswimming for a while, or whatever, or overtraining, takes 2 or 3 months off, and then the next time they come to the squad, put their hand in the bag, they pull out the white cap and the goggle that's still got the
sand on
it from Rottnest, put it on, and like, I'm the solo swimmer, get in, fuck your shoulders up, you know, and all of that. And I think that too is, it's quite, that too I found can be quite harsh. I mean, I'm somebody who, right from school playing rugby and being in high performing teams playing rugby and things like that, you know, the beauty of sport is you get like this immediate feedback, like I spoke to earlier on, but we don't necessarily get that immediate feedback so much in life. And so it can be brilliant to leave you, you know, have you completely present in life. But then once it's gone, where's that feedback coming from? How do I maintain as much presence in reality? How do I hold myself to account against something that, well, it's gone now? And then am I still living off that story and that piece of identity for a period of time? You know, I could have been down to, let's arbitrarily say, you know, 90, 92 kilograms, lost 10 or 12 kilograms, you know, looking good, feeling good, you know, and then I live off it for months and months and months and avoid the mirror. And then all of a sudden it's like, you've crept back to 105 kilograms and those beers and Mackies didn't help since. And so, I think, because certainly the last time I did it, I was fortunate enough to be, in 2015, made redundant. And so I had nothing else to worry about.
Yeah, sure.
So I could just train, and it was amazing. So I had this identity, I was feeling good about myself. And I was very present, super present, scarily present for some people.
Yeah, right.
And then all of a sudden it all seemed to
just melt away.
And I was lost. I was lost for quite some time.
Do you think that would have been the same had you had employment at that time? Like, would that have been a distraction?
Having done it this time around, I struggled with work.
Yeah. Okay.
And in the last week or so, I've just had this tidal wave of stuff that I've put off come back to me. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that there's something intoxicating. You're changing stuff all the time. You're feeling really good. You're very present. And I think the other bit is that, let's be honest, life can be a bit shitty at times, and it can be, you can struggle to find meaning in the world, and you can struggle to find purpose in the world. And then all of a sudden you're in this, you create yourself a container that gives you meaning, gives you purpose.
Definitely, yeah.
And it is very life affirming. And you have and like I said, the people you train with, they're present as well. So you're very connected. Connected with life, connected with what's happening. And certainly with something like Swim to Rottnest, you're very, I spent a lot of time in the ocean, so you're very present in the ocean, and you're spending time in your nervous system as well. Because you're spending hours in the ocean, and we all know what's in there.
Yeah. Certainly here in these parts.
Yeah, and you get more and more used to that. That's not to say you don't. I'm not worried about what's in there, but it doesn't worry me. It still worries me. And so you have all this amazing meaning and purpose and identity and presence, and then all of a sudden it's linked to this one thing, and then it can be essentially challenging. And it's been interesting to watch a couple of people who remain nameless, who did a solo last year, struggle with their FOMO this year.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, every year I don't do it. I struggle with my FOMO. Really, I wish I was out there. I mean, this is the first time this year that I actually went over the day before with my kids, and I was on the island waiting for everyone to come in and come over. And there's always that feeling of, what are those conditions actually going to be like, and are they potentially better than any time that I've swum it in the past, and would that therefore mean that I could swim a really good time, and these sort of things, but you just don't know that. But I mean, this year around, I must admit, my little boy was out fishing off the jetty, and my little girl was just hanging around with me, just watching everybody come in, and we were waiting for Mish, my wife, to come in. She'd done a duo swim with her friend Carly, and there was definitely a feeling of FOMO, but maybe not as strong as it has been in the past, but I think this whole thing really, when you look at it a bit more broadly, I think there's countless stories of elite athletes who, when they retire, they just fall completely off the perch, and in fact I've actually interviewed quite a few of them on my podcast, and it's not too dissimilar, really. I mean, they all talk about this loss of identity, and what am I now if I'm not so and so Olympic champion type of thing, and it's it's very much that. And I think I was trying to think back a little bit earlier on when we first started chatting. I was thinking back to, okay, well, when I was racing in the UK as a triathlete, I was racing at a high level. But apart from maybe going to like a World Championships, or in my case, I went to the World Student Games as well. Those were like big events that you're preparing for. But they, as big as they seem against Windsor Triathlon, for example, or whatever it might be, a Bournemouth Olympic distance triathlon sort of thing, they weren't, because I was actually racing almost every single weekend. There was never a really massive lead up to one specific event where you put all your eggs in one basket and then this massive drop off. Yeah. So the sort of blues that we're talking about here, I never really ever experienced that as an athlete when I was racing triathlon, when I was racing week in, week out. I've only started to become cognizant of it in doing some of the longer challenging events that I've done myself, where your body's actually ready for a rest afterwards, and that's why you then enter this sort of state of non-training, which sort of probably enhances that feeling really of a bit of loss by cutting away the routine, the daily routine. And I think and I think the same thing as well, like I mentioned it earlier on, 10, 20 years ago, people weren't building up for these massive events like they are, not in their numbers that they're doing now.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's a great conversation to be having, because there's a lot of people who do build up for these. And, you know, like you alluded to earlier on, you don't have to be building up to a Rottnest solo swim. It might be your first Olympic distance triathlon, or even a sprint triathlon, you know, but you're getting into it and you're building up and you haven't really, you know, sort of considered what's going to happen after that point. How do you then cope with what happens thereafter? Yeah.
And I think, like I said, this is not... The purpose of this conversation is not to say, oh, we shouldn't do it.
No, absolutely, far right. Yeah, far enough.
This is what life's about.
Totally,
doing great things and making yourself proud and going, far out, look what I've done.
And in many ways, just on that very specific point, it's not about saying that. And the people that I generally perceive to not have issues with this sort of thing are the ones who their solution to it is to not stop. You know, so there isn't like they don't stop after the big one. They keep going to the next one and stuff. And you know, Barry Eves, who's 86 years of age,
that's kicking it down.
Oh, it is, yeah. But I mean, you know, just it's like thinking again a bit more broadly about life in general. You know, Barry Eves, who swims in our squad, 86 years of age. Everyone, I always ask him, what's his secret to his health and his fitness and stuff. You know, he swims 5K with us 3 or 4 times a week at that age, and he just says very simply, his secret to longevity is don't stop.
Don't stop, yeah.
You know, and there's plenty of Rottnest solo swimmers out there who I look at, and every year they say that's the last one,
yeah.
And then the next year they're still back there building up for it and doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe by doing that is their sort of part of their coping mechanism for that.
Indeed, that's interesting because like, I guess for me,
they're looking for your Bryn.
They are.
Police helicopter.
I guess for me, there is no desire to do one next year. I'm very open to the fact there will be another one. In fact, I spent 40 minutes on the Sunday writing notes.
Oh, did you?
To future Bryn.
Right, future Bryn.
Who will do the third one.
Yeah.
Whenever he catches the feeling to do it.
Yeah.
So it was all about the training and everything. Yep. And so it was always like closing it.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that itself was super helpful. I think part of it is what I've done, particularly last week, was I actively celebrated it. And I think I actively grieved it.
Right, okay, yeah.
Because you are losing something.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what I wanted to talk about. You are losing a sense of identity, you are losing a sense of purpose that is specific.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think because I recognised that I became a bit of a... So my solution to the last one in 2016 was to swim more. And then my body just collapsed in on itself because I'd over-specialised it.
Swim more after the event?
I carried on swimming to a level of intensity. I agreed to do a duo with Lucy the following year, to train to that. And then, you know, I think I had to stop swimming 10 days before the event and then just rest up to do the event. And then that was it. I was like,
that's it, game over,
Game over. So I think that put it off by carrying on from an anatomical point of view. I don't know whether that stacks up because you had your back out.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely wasn't related to the swimming. Funny enough, it was actually related more to the lack of swimming. So I think striking that balance is very, very important. You know, it's like, okay, I'm saying here that 86-year-old Barry Eves continues on every single day doing it because he knows that if he stops, he's going to fall into a hole. You know, the perennial Rottnest solo swimmers who just do it year in, year out sort of thing. You know, they're on that schedule and stuff. And I think I found myself that if I stop training completely, I actually physically feel really bad.
Yes.
But equally, I can see what you're saying there. If you continue to push the envelope, as it were, or press the envelope, however the phrase goes.
I guess interestingly for me this time around, I knew what had happened before. My body collapsed in. I knew that I became quite grumpy. I knew that I had a big loss of sense of identity. And I think last time there was very much me feeding something. This time I've made sure that this adventure fed something bigger than the adventure itself. And so I was saying before, I did a lot of strength and movement specific around making sure body integrity was good for swimming. But now I'm doing a 10-week program to unwind that specialisation.
Yeah, okay.
And unwind that and strengthen up areas that have been neglected. And be a bit more delicate on areas that have been, and I've fallen back in love with swimming again through doing this. And so, it's not going to be 27, 30 kilometres a week. It's back to 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Which I'm very happy with.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I did as well was I took notes along the way of the things that the elements that I was enjoying.
Yeah.
So that there was like a bigger, broader practice.
It's very insightful of you to do that. So, I mean, most people might keep a record of how many kilometres they swam.
I did that too.
You did, I'm sure you did. Yeah.
I got a spreadsheet, like everyone.
I'm sure you have. Yeah.
But I got a blue book as well, where where I thought more about what are some of the elements that I'm really, really enjoying.
Yeah.
So that the fact that the container of the solo swim.
Did the red mist sessions ever feature?
Yeah, they do. Did they? Well, they do. They do. For two reasons. One is the importance of putting yourself into dark spots. Dark spots meaning where you are physically challenged.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love particularly about the red mist is that you specifically design them to put people into.
Totally.
Remember that end of November session where I told you?
Yeah.
There was a point there, Paul, where I never wanted to swim
ever again.
I'm fucking over this sport. But I got to the end of the session, so I understand the importance of it, of going to those dark spots, and that was one of the things that was in there. But then also, it was also the importance of being in a squad.
Yes.
And that community.
Yeah.
And going to the dark spots with your friends, and then going for the coffees afterwards.
Totally, yeah.
And the whole atmosphere around that.
It's just that joy of having swimming in common, isn't it, with those other people? Yeah.
And having those connections as well. There were other things as well about the importance of me doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise, hour to hour and a half, several times a week, because I just put that as one side for a while. I always got to a place where I looked across my endurance career several years ago and suddenly went, I think because I was in the pain of what the monotonous repetition movement does to your body, and I had to spend a year or so at places like Modus unwinding that.
Yeah.
So there was a part of me that was like, I'm never going back to that shit because it does this to your body. And so I went away from it for a year or so. So now, being able to concentrate on the integrity of my body, because I still would like it to work really well when I'm 80.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then layer on these things, like a Rottnest channel swim. It was awesome. It means I could go do it, come back and not be physically bent up out of shape. But as well as contemplating identity and things like that means that I can also not have that rough emotional ride as well. But like I said, things like red mist are important because it is still good to go and put yourself in the mangle, routinely.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't feel like I've done a good enough job, to be honest with you, as a coach, if you're not in the mangle on that particular session, to use your words. I mean, that's the whole reason it's got that name, Red Mist, is it's designed to actually put you in. You mentioned there, like, to physically challenge yourself, but it also hopefully mentally and emotionally challenges you as well. And by trying to stave off the red mist and not get snappy and irritable sort of thing, and actually just say, like, I'm all right, I'm here, I can get through this, I can do it. I mean, you go through those emotions hundreds of times on a bigger event.
Yes.
Like the Rottnest swim and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And so now Wednesday mornings, I know where I can go, or on a once a week event, where I can go to have that.
Yeah.
Being forced to be present.
That's right.
Going to a dark spot.
Yeah. You might think I sound like a bit of a masochist saying. I mean, I design it for that purpose. And it's but that's
the point.
That is the point.
That's the point.
That's its purpose.
When I was spending 7 hours and 45 minutes, 15 minutes longer than a working day on my trip to Rottnest.
Yeah.
Which was a lovely day out in nature, I described to someone the other day. But, there were dark spots along the way.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. The body carried on while the mind was
doing its thing,
wigging out.
Yeah.
And so but going back to it, there are things like that in the list, in the notes that I've taken, and that meeting the environment and adapting to the environment. It made me become, I think, more aware of being in my body and the movement practice.
Yeah.
Which means, and it also meant that I don't want to swim to Rottnest again next year for a variety of reasons. But I've just spent the last 9-10 months specialising in a monotonous movement exercise. So now I've sort of got to this point where, well, that's cool, and I've done that thing. And look, on a bigger scale, if you apply yourself and layer yourself up, you can go and do it.
Yeah.
So what other things can I do?
Yeah.
Now, which is exciting. So now I'm drawn to something that may have a lot more random movement and maybe a hand-eye coordination. So maybe I'll go and play touch rugby for a while.
Yeah, right.
Or something like that.
Be careful.
Yeah, but touch rugby, not
Yeah.
47 now. But it's that, and I think it's because I've been in the container and I was more present in it, not only connecting up the training to the event, but the training to the event and afterwards. It means that I've got this rich source of stuff that I can pull on.
Totally, yeah.
And I'm not also dealing with the existential drama of having lost this amazing sense of identity and self-worth in the world, which has been conditionally associated with swim to Rottnest.
Yes.
Which is now done.
Yeah.
You know.
So here's a question for you, and this might seem like I'm just blowing this all the wind out of your sails. The perception of identity, I believe, is very much your own perception of that identity, and maybe
Indeed.
not the same. You know, if I asked the other 6 people who are swimming with you in the lane, what do you think of Bryn?
Yeah.
You know, would all 6 of them say, oh yeah, Bryn's a Rottnest shallow swimmer from 2016 and 2022? Or would they say, that's the guy who takes the beeper at the in the session sort of thing and leads for the 400s, for example, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting one, because one of the reflections that I've had is what causes me a lot of stress, or has caused me a lot of stress in events in the past, is always worrying about what maybe other people are thinking about how I'm performing at any given point in time. So I'd be going along. I remember doing the European Duathlon Championships in Poland years and years ago, and I was going along. I had some sort of weird, I don't know what it was, maybe I was dehydrated or something, but I didn't finish the event. And I actually remember just almost like getting a bit sort of like tripping out a little bit, imagining everybody who was actually on the sidelines were all sort of laughing at him, going, "Yeah, he's doing." They weren't, of course.
Yeah.
But in my head, that's what I was actually telling myself, and it's a funny thing, really, because my perception there was that they were thinking that this guy is failing and he's falling down, whereas, and of course, it was me who was telling myself that. And I've gone through other events and often wondered about, okay, where am I going to finish, and what will my closest mates think about me if I finish in 5th place rather than 1st place, or in 5 hours rather than 4 hours, whatever it might be, type of thing. And the honest answer that I've had to that, from sitting on the sidelines a lot more over the last few years specifically, is that when you're watching something like a triathlon event as a spectator, unless you've got the stopwatch out and your spreadsheet and you're watching exactly where everybody is, and you've got absolutely no bloody idea where anybody is within that race whatsoever. Yeah. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think we often build up this sense of identity and perception of ourselves related to the event that we've maybe been training up for, and through comparing to others, and also comparing, and also imagining what they might be thinking about. Okay, it's going to be great if so and so, and that's not to say that people don't go through a list of results at the end and go, oh, okay, Bryn did such and such, but I was expecting this, or he did much better than I thought, or what have you. People do that,
or so and so came ahead of me.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought, I didn't expect that one.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But as one of my mates very fondly says, and I'm going to swear here, sort of thing, he, with respect to a lot of things, everybody is so busy in their own lives and doing what they're doing,
Yes.
that nobody really fucking cares. Like,
No.
to be perfectly honest with you.
No.
I think the biggest barrier to moving forwards after a big event is obviously an internal barrier, and it is laying the groundwork. Like I think what you've done there, and saying, you're sort of undoing some of that specification. That's a great way of looking at it, because it's sort of saying, okay, for the next 10 weeks, that's what I'm going to focus on doing. But you need to have set that as a goal or a task before you finish the big one, because I think if you fall off the edge and then leave it 2 or 3 weeks and try and pick it up beyond that point, it's very, very difficult. And I had my first solo swim was 2009, and literally 6 days later, Michelle, my wife, gave birth to Jackson, our son. So 6 days after the event. So you can only imagine how nervous both me and her were leading up to the event, thinking, okay, well, if he comes early, or he or she, we didn't know at that point, but here, if the baby comes early, then that 9 months of training is done, and I'm just going to have to deal with it. So I think in my head, I was even at that point starting to think, okay, well, I've really enjoyed the journey building up and training for this event, but I think had I not been able to complete my first one, it would have been a big thorn in the side sort of thing. So it'd be like, okay, I just wanted to know what that experience was like. But the point was that I had those couple of days immediately after, and of course Michelle was heavily pregnant. She actually came down to a CSS Fresh and Fruity threshold session on the morning she gave birth to Jackson.
Right.
And she was swimming, she swam all the way through her pregnancy. But of course, 6 days later, then suddenly I was thrust into a world of having my first child, and like my world changed completely. And I had to sort of respond to that. And suddenly the high of the week beforehand was replaced with the high of having a baby, having Jackson.
Where it seems like such a small
totally
thing.
Totally, such a massive thing, exactly right. And funny enough, I actually just sort of, in that scenario, I almost just forgot about the solo swim, because it just paled into insignificance in comparison. And and I didn't mourn for it or anything like that, because I was obviously excited about what was going on around me, really. And I feel like that sometimes regarding injury as well. It's like this is almost the exact same thing. When you train up for a big event, you get hyper focused on it, because you have to, like you say, you don't know if it's going to be a southwesterly blowing at 25 knots sort of thing, and you're going to be in the water for 10 hours rather than 6 like you thought you might be. You've got to focus, and you've got to put in the time and the commitment to it. So focus and purpose it's not a bad thing. We're not saying it's a bad thing. But on the flip side of it, I find I do the same sort of thing with injury. So when you get injured, suddenly all the focus comes on not being injured. How do I not be injured? The outcome there is not getting across to Rottnest. The outcome is, how do I stop being injured? And I get hyper focused on that. And funny enough, the only time the injury ever seems to truly go away is when I get distracted by something else, and then onto a different focus point. So I think obviously through life we jump around these different focal points and stuff, and finding something to replace what was just gone is probably the best solution, really, to move forwards with that.
Indeed. But possibly that has a variation to it, so you can continue to develop.
Absolutely. Listen to that, Bryn. One of the first airplanes flying into Perth, Western Australia, after 2 years.
I know. They're all 2 weeks late. They could have swum.
Yeah.
There we go. I mean, I think that covers most of the things I wanted to talk about. Do you think there's anything else to add to it? Like I said, it's not. I wasn't expecting to come to a massive crescendo.
No.
Like, therefore, you should do. Maybe, if anything, it's something to consider.
And I think if your experience now with having done a lot of these events, and it's your second solo swim, and you start to, and you're obviously a very thoughtful guy, thinking to this level of depth. Some people probably been listening to this and think, gee, do Paul and Bryn actually have a life outside of thinking about their training and racing and stuff like that? And the answer is yes, of course we do.
Very much
so, yeah. But I think, if you are an inexperienced athlete, and you are maybe training up for, whether it be your first solo swim or your first triathlon or your first marathon or what have you, there's definitely no rule book or training program that I've seen that talks about what happens after. And I think it's an important thing. Maybe there are a lot of, as we mentioned before, mass participation in some of these massive events has only been on the increase in the last 10 years. And the types of people who are doing these events now are very different to what we were doing 20 years ago. I was considered a total freak at school for doing triathlon, like total freak. I was the only kid in school who swam. I was then the only kid in school who, went for a run at his lunch breaks and then went cycling in the evening and that type of thing. It was unheard of. Whereas nowadays, that participation, like every other person you speak to is a triathlete, or has done some, or around these parts has done some sort of endurance event, and I think, I think that's obviously that's a great thing for all sports in general, that bigger participation, and it might well be that the nerdy among us, the people who have been around the traps for a long time, who do think about some of this stuff and potentially even overthink it sometimes, maybe your weekend warrior who decides to do his or her first triathlon, maybe the natural response is they don't hit this big drop off afterwards. They just move on to the next thing, the next part of their life. It's a natural thing. It's I've done that triathlon, and they're quite happy to then move on to it. I think where you get in trouble or in danger is that the classic thing, and they reckon, here's a little factoid of information for you, they reckon the average lifespan of a triathlete, and I'm saying triathlete here because simply I know this fact from the governing bodies and stuff. It might well be true for marathon swimmers as well, or marathon runners. They reckon the average lifespan for a triathlete these days is 2.5 years.
Right.
And that's not their actual lifespan, of course. Triathlon doesn't kill you. Not that we know of, anyway. But the idea, they actually recognise that, okay, getting into sport, it's a fun idea, getting with your mates and you do your first sprint or Olympic distance triathlon, and you might even go over the full Monty, because I see that a lot more these days as well. It's like, in the past, it always used to be this progression. It would be like you had to almost earn your stripes. You go sprint distance, Olympic distance, half Ironman, full Ironman. It was always that progression, always. Or you just stuck at doing Olympic distance and representing your country or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But these days, you do see a lot more people just going, bang, I'm going to be an Ironman straight away. That's where I'm going. And then the classic, and the reason they reckon it's like a 2-year cycle sort of thing is you'll do your Ironman and you'll think, wow, that was great. You'll have your little bit of down period, and then the classic scenario is, I want to be better next time. So then you build up again with the assumption and the hope that not just your speed and your achievement and your performance and where you finish in the race is going to be better than the first time, but the actual experience of the training is going to be more joyful as well.
Yes.
Very, very rarely do I ever hear anyone say their first Ironman, the training for the first Ironman, was less enjoyable than their second one. The second one, it usually becomes a little bit more serious and a little bit more focused and stuff like that. And there's almost this pressure that people put on themselves to achieve better. Most people that I speak to, and I certainly feel this myself, your first is always your best. Not necessarily.
I know lots of people
performance-wise.
say, "Oh, you're going to do your second solo."
Yeah.
My second one was shit.
Yeah.
It was like I didn't enjoy it. I think maybe for me, because it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Because I let go of swimming.
Totally.
And I didn't see a second one ever again on the horizon.
Yeah.
And then it came back for a variety of reasons. COVID, going to the start line and catching FOMO, having been to the start line for 2 years and had no FOMO in the slightest.
That's right, yeah.
And a couple of things like that meant that it was as exciting as the first one.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't follow that route. And there was a little bit of comparing to the first one. And
there always is.
Then I
It's
suddenly
inevitable.
realised I've got to stop this.
It's inevitable. I mean, I personally, I would never go back and do the English Channel. People ask me that all the time. Would you go back and swim the English Channel? And apart from it being a massively costly exercise to train up and put yourself in there for 3 years, and cost of the thing going across, I feel like I have ticked that box. And I don't really. I mean, I'm not happy with the time that I did across there. I'm not happy with the conditions that I swam in, sort of thing. But I made it, and I ticked the box. I'd never go back and wouldn't consider doing that one again. And that's totally, it's totally fine. It is totally fine. It's not going to stop me doing other marathon swimming events and that type of thing. Yeah.
There we go. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think for anybody who's listened to this, hopefully there's tons and tons in there for you to think about. like I said, I don't think there's one specific thing other than consider it.
Absolutely.
And consider what we've discussed, and yeah, because I think if you could, like I said, if you can leave this thing with a lot more ease and grace,
Yep.
and pick up all of the nuggets that you've picked up along the way and take them into everyday life, as you come back to a level of homeostasis or whatever it is.
Yeah. You know, it's definitely I mean, it's a cliche that's used far too often, probably, but you know, it's not about the destination; it's the journey, man.
Yeah.
You know, but it is actually the truth. Like it is actually the truth, you know. And I think, you know, after you've completed one destination, go on another journey. And I was thinking just back then, you know, the English Channel thing, I wouldn't go back and do that. Similarly, I've been really hesitant. Michelle's wanting me to take her back to India and go and do India and Nepal, go trekking, backpacking and stuff. And I've got such vividly strong, fond memories of that place that I almost don't want to taint that.
Yeah.
You know, and it'd just be different, right? It wouldn't be better or worse. It'd just be different. You know, but I've held off going there in a similar sort of way that I've held off, you know, doing the English Channel. So, you know, it might not be India, but South America maybe. You know, now the borders are open up and.
Good fun down there.
Oh yeah, I know.
Indeed. Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Cheers.
Great chatting.
Indeed.